Hey everybody, uglyShader here with another YouTube video. And today we're just doing a rundown on the uglyMasks node. Another one of those kind of all-in-one ugly nodes I put together. And this one's kind of originally meant to be like a partner or a counter, like an aid or a secondary option. I don't even know what to call it. It was originally the idea was it would be going with the pattern generation node, but it does pretty good as a standalone node doing its own thing, so whatever. It'll be live on Gumroad pretty much as soon as this video's done. I gotta wait for the video to be uploaded though before I have a link to put in the readme, stuff like that. So the video will predate the product being available by an hour or something, probably tops. Anyhow, let's get into it. So this one, just like the last one, works in practically any version of Blender. I'm gonna go ahead and throw a plane down to use as our visual reference so we can see what it's doing. Throw a split in there and switch that to the shader editor, and we'll probably want a light so we can see stuff. It does work in Eevee, but some of its updates take a minute. Basically, you could say it's kind of optimized for cycles. Alright, so now just like the other ones I made, we simply get it into our environment by appending it to the scene. So I'm going to put a material on this plane, and then I'm going to replace that BSDF with just a plain old diffuse shader. Because it's a mask generator node, there's a good chance it'll normally be getting plugged into like the factor of a mix node or something, but for example purposes, this way we can just see a simple grayscale output of whatever it's generating. Okay, so now just like with the last stuff, we append it to get it to the environment. So we select append, we navigate on our desktop to wherever we have the file, and in the file it gives us a list of everything that you find in our blend file. Well, this is a node group, so we're going to dig it out of the node tree folder. And if we open up the node tree folder, you can see it's all we got. So go ahead and highlight it, select append, and now it is in our blend file. It didn't get put automatically into our shader editor, but that's okay. It's in our file now. To go ahead and add it to our shader editor, we can click on add and go down to the group category, and there it is, uglyMasks. I'm going to stretch this out a little bit. Go ahead and plug it in. Oh, not roughness, color. And you can see by default it went black. And that's because by default, just like all the others I make, it comes in not doing anything. Everything's turned off by default so that you have to turn it on. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and skip over these first four. The color carry in, the carry in switch, carry mix, and the carry fade. And we're just going to start here with like texture 1. Okay, so the main function of this node group is right here in this small handful of settings. All these other settings down here are just to be able to control the textures. The primary use of this group is right here in these layer 1 through 5 settings. Okay, so what this does is it's a numerical setting that allows you to choose any one of 7 different of the more common built-in Blender textures for each layer. Your 7 options are brick texture, checker texture, magic texture, moosecroft texture, noise texture, Varonoi texture, and wave texture, and they are quite literally just set up on a numerical interface numbered accordingly. So 1 is a brick texture, 2 is a checker, 3 is a magic, 4 is a moosecroft, 5 is a noise, 6 is a Varonoi, and 7 is your wave texture. All you have to do is pick the number of the texture that you want, and there you go. And now what this is meant to do is it lets you layer multiple different textures together with multiple different methods, quick and easy, without having to build any of the networks necessary to do it. So we picked a brick texture for our first one. We'll pick a checker texture for our second one. That's checker 2 or texture 2. And now as you can see, nothing has changed. And that's because we have to select a method by which to apply texture 2 to what came before it. In this case, texture 1. Now, we have 10 different options available, technically 11 if you count 0, but 0, as you can see, we don't have anything going on over here. 0 is no mix applied. Basically, you can pick a texture for layer 2, but it's not going to get added to anything until you pick a method by which it needs to be added. So our 10 different options are add, subtract, multiply, divide, difference, lighten, darken, overlay, linear light, and screen. Yeah, 10 was screen. Last one, screen. Now, those are pretty much the more common ones to be used when working with grayscale images. All of these images, all these generated textures are essentially getting fed through a mathematics-based color ramp before they make it to the output. So they're always going to be grayscale. As a result of that, being able to mix things together based on principles like hue or saturation just didn't really seem to make a whole lot of sense. So yeah, that's the main function of it right there, and it's just a question of what you can do with it from there, you know. So we'll do a mix method real fast of the difference, and let's add a third layer to it. So third layer, let's add a magic texture. We'll go in order. We got 1, 2, and 3 now. Oh, and for each of the mixes, there's an option to fade, you know, so you can control how much of the mix you're getting. Anything with layers should be able to fade, so yeah, you have fade settings in there. All right, so we've picked a magic texture for that. How do we add it? Well, let's multiply it. And there we go. Now we got obviously some dark stuff going on here. You can see it gave us like this bands with dark spots to it. Now let's give it texture 4. Let's give it a noise texture, a little bit of random noise in there. Noise is 5. And then I want to subtract the noise from what we have here, so that's option number 2. Maybe that's a bit much. How about we multiply what we have here by the noise? Yeah, that's better. That just kind of darkened it, gave us a little bit more variation to our grayness here and there and stuff. And now for texture 5, let's go ahead and put a brick back in there, but let's use the linear light method to overlay them. That should give us real contrasty results. And there we go. So now we got like a broken brick wall going on. Took just a couple seconds of throwing some quick settings down, and you know, nice and easy. Basically the whole point is it's just a quick and easy way for people to save time and not have to mess with the nodes as much when they don't want to, or when it's for, you know, something that they don't need to really for. Okay, and that pretty much covers it. You have 5 different layers. You can pick any one of the 7 textures for each layer. There's 10 different mixing methods. You can pick any one of the 10 different methods for each mix layer, and all 5 layers have a fade option. So yeah, that's like the body of this node group in a nutshell. And then everything else after this is the settings you would traditionally find on the various textures that you're being able to use, with a couple exceptions, just a couple exceptions. And hold on real quick, I see something that's wrong. I guess not so much wrong, just something I missed. Let me turn you off. Okay, that's better. Yeah, okay. So let's go ahead and look at the different texture controls that we have available to us. Well, first off, there's a label, and you can plug anything you want into it, but it's not going to do anything because it just goes to nothing on the inside of the node group. It tells you what texture it is numerically, so when we select 1 for our texture in our layers, we are selecting the brick texture. And then underneath that it has manual mapping. Now any one of the 7 textures, that by default they all use generated coordinates, just default generated coordinates. But if you want any of them to use specific specific coordinates that you have control over, particularly like object-based coordinates or something like that, all you have to do is plug the mapping node into the manual mapping input and turn on the manual mapping input switch. That's it. So anytime you want specific control over the vector information of any one of the textures, that's all it takes. Next in line, we have a variation switch, and that's a byproduct of how node groups work and what you can and cannot plug into the input of a node group. For example, if we open this up, you can see here we got a bunch of this same texture. Well, let's zoom in on it. What is it? Well, this is our brick texture. And as you can see, we can pass vector, colors, and scales, and all these primary basic settings. We can plug these into the input of a node group. But what about these? We can't plug these into our node group. We have no control over these. And that sucks, you know? So I gave you a halfway workaround. Now with most of the textures that are in here, it's pretty much a complete workaround. But with the brick texture, it's only a halfway workaround. And I say that because this offset is a 0 to 1 slider. This frequency, this squash, and this frequency are all like, well, the squash is a 0 to 99 value, and these frequencies are 1 to 99 values, meaning the possible combination outputs or variations that you could come up with these four control points are in the thousands, thousands and thousands of them. There's so many different variations you could come up with. I wasn't about to build thousands and thousands and thousands of nodes and try to kill your computer inside of this node group. So we have 25 variations for brick. Pretty much everything else that has a variation is completely built out. Like depth for magic texture, there's 0 through 10 for its selections. So here's 11 magic textures. Over here, I left anything that had a 1D, 2D, 3D, 4D, I left as 3D by default, but any other setting that could be controlled is controllable through the variation. So Moose Grave has 5, if I remember right. Yep, 5 in there. And as you can see, we have 5 Moose Grave textures there. Noise gives you, or not noise, but Varonoi ends up giving you a total of 14 different possible combinations. And then for wave, you get 6 primary combinations, provided you don't play with the X, Y, and Z options. I set all the banding to diagonal, and I set all of the ring-oriented ones to spherical, and that is because you have control over their mapping and don't really need to worry about the X, Y, Z options. So yeah, brick is kind of limited, and you may find yourself on occasion wanting to come in and change these manually. However, all the other texture options that have a variation, the variation covers pretty much every possible variation of those settings that cannot be plugged into the node group. Okay, so let's go ahead and turn that mix off, turn that mix off, that mix off, and that mix off. So now we're not mixing anything else in, and even though we have textures selected, we're still just looking at our default texture of our layer 1. So yeah, we have 25 different variations, and I figured the 25 would give you plenty of control over some of the different, ways that you could make. Basically, I was hoping it would be enough variation that you wouldn't have to open the node editor up and manually deal with stuff. Just trying to make everything easier for the end user, and opening up a node network and navigating for an option to change is not easy on the end user. So yeah, you have a large variation selection there, and any texture that it's applicable for, ergo textures that have values that cannot be passed through to the node input, you will find that variation slider. Now, the different variations, like their combinations, as well as how many variations there are listed in the README. So if you're ever curious about that, everything's in the README. What the 7 different textures are, what their numbers are, what the 10 different mixing methods are, what their numbers are, the variation switches, what variations you get out of what numbers. It's all in the README. So if you're ever curious about any of it, just check out the README. All right, so after variation, we have one labeled mod. And this is another one of those custom settings. Anybody that's worked with procedural materials knows that you oftentimes have more than one output option on those generated textures. Oftentimes it's color and factor. There are a few other things that get mixed in here and there, like depth or height or something like that. Anyway, so if you've ever played with them, you know that sometimes there is a noticeable visual difference between factor and color, particularly in something like a brick texture where we have all this gradient of grays. This mod, for any texture in the list you find a mod value for, is simply a switch for that. It switches you between the color option and the factor option. So as you can see with the brick texture, it took us from this nice gradient grayscaled image to just black and white. We're looking at factor, we're looking at color. So any texture that you find this switch for, we got it for checker texture, we got it for the magic texture, don't have it for the moose grove texture, so it's not there for all of them, just like a variation isn't there for all of them, like noise has mod but no variation, but for those that it's there for, that's the purpose it serves. It is there simply to switch between the color output and the factor output of that initial generated texture. Okay, then we have two more settings, and all of the textures have these settings, and it's because it was applicable to all of them. It's pretty much just a color ramp. It is a black-white color ramp, a two-value color ramp, exactly what the default color ramp looks like when you add it to your scene. It's got a black value at 0, a white value at 1, and two control points at those values. Well, if you look at this, we have it's labeled balance, but yeah, it's a color ramp. It's just labeled balance because its function is to adjust the black-white balance of the grayscale image. So we can increase the black, and as you can see, it increases the amount of black in our image while cutting out however much white was filled up by that image. We can reduce the amount of gray and increase the amount of white. And just like a normal color ramp, anytime your white value gets below your black value, the image inverts itself. So it functions just like a normal color ramp, and all 7 textures have that available so that you can clamp the values a bit and bring out certain qualities of the texture that you would like to highlight. Beyond that point, everything is 100% just the default texture settings that you find on those textures. You know, a brick has color 1, color 2, mortar color, scale, mortar size, mortar smooth bias, brick width, and row height. Those are all of the control settings you find on a brick texture. Now, mind you, we have value 1, 2, and value mortar instead of color, but that's because these are all grayscale images. There's no point in having color. You just have a 0 to 1 value where 0 represents black, white, or 1 represents white. So yeah, anywhere that there was a color, it's been replaced by a value. But other than that, once you make it past the white-black balance, everything is just the default texture settings that you find on those generated textures. Um, yeah, there's that's pretty much it. There's only one other thing to keep in mind, and we can look at that with our Moose Grove texture. Now, we have our manual mapping switch, just like all the others. We have a variation option, just like some of the others. This one does not have a mod option like some of the others, and it's got a lowercase b. We can't have that. Hold on, we must repair that. You are not supposed to be a lowercase b. You are to be a capital B so that the whole world knows. All right? There. Sorry. I just saw that there and my brain lost it. All right, so we have the Moose Grove texture. And yeah, once we get past the color balance, we have just normal Moose Grove settings. We have scale, detail, dimension, luminosity, or lucinarity, sorry, offset, and gain. Now, here's the thing. We have 6 settings here. Let's grab us a Moose Grove texture, or Moose Grave, however it's supposed to be pronounced. Well, we have scale, detail, dimension, and lucinarity. Well, what about our offset and gain? They're clearly right here. How come we don't have them? Well, we don't have them because they are only available with certain configurations of these pass-through settings. So if you want to be able to use your offset and your gain, well, then you're going to need to be on the proper variation selection in order to utilize those settings. And that also means if you ever go to adjust offset or gain and it has like absolutely no impact on your image at all, there's a good chance that whatever variation you are on does not currently support offset and gain. No worry, nothing's broken. It's just the type of texture you have selected does not currently support it. Another good one to represent that is with Varonoi Textures. There's, I think, 14 or 15 total possible variations with it. And yeah, anytime that you have F1s or the smooth F1 selected, it adds smoothness as an option. It doesn't matter what these are set to. If it's set, like you can see, we have no smoothness, no smoothness. Distance to edge, no smoothness. In sphere radius, no smoothness. However, anytime it's using a variation that has this section set to smooth, we have a smoothness option. Likewise, it doesn't matter what this is set to, well, with the exception of these, because these take away, the distance to edge and in sphere radius take away your other selection. But it doesn't matter if it's set to F1, F2, or smooth F1. Anytime that this is set to the Minkowski, we have an exponent option. So if this happens to be set to smooth F1 and that's set to Minkowski, we have the smoothness and the exponent option. So yeah, as you cycle through the different variations, not all of the settings always work. I'm pretty sure it's only an issue with the Musgrave. Yeah, see, we lost offset and gain on some of those. That one's even got an offset, but no gain. So yeah, the Musgrave and the Varonoi texture, those are the only ones it matters on. I'm pretty sure that on the wave texture, scale, scale, yeah, it doesn't matter what you're set to, it still has all of the same settings. So yeah, if you're using the Musgrave or the Varonoi texture and you're finding that you're having a problem with your adjustment actually changing anything, odds are it's because you're currently using a variation that does not support that setting. No big deal. And again, that stuff will be listed in the README. So that was 5, that was 3. Oh, how did I mix you together? Was it 3 also? I think it was 3 also. And then you were mixed with a 9. All right, so the only 4 settings we haven't talked about are the carry in switch, the carry in mix method, and the carry in mix fade. Now, basically, these work just like the layer texture would be a carry in. Carry in switch tells you whether or not you're using the carry in, because by default we have this image here. If I turn the carry in on, you can see it altered our image, and that's because we're carrying in black, and it is now trying to use that black as the base for what we're working on. We set the method to 2 or 3, and you can see we're having subtle but not real obvious effects on things. And yeah, it's because it's now trying to use this as essentially layer 0. So like we have our layer 1, our layer 2, so on and so forth. Well, this would be layer 0. And the purpose behind that is now we can take this one and let's go ahead and reset things at default. Nope, not 1, 0. Just tab 0 my way down that list. And let's drop this in line here. And we turn on the carry in switch. Now we are looking at exactly what we had beforehand. It's literally just passing it through. But now we get to play. So let's say layer 1, I want it to be a wave, And now our carry in mix method and carry in mix fade is essentially how we're going to mix this with layer 1. So now this isn't layer 1, this is layer 6, layer 2 is now layer 7, layer 3 is 8, layer 4 is 9, and layer 5 is 10. It gives us the ability to simply add more. So let's subtract. No. How about difference? Come on. Oh, duh. Guess it would help if I plugged that back in, huh? I'm like, why is it not having an effect? Yeah, so let's go back to that subtract. Ooh, yeah, it's ugly. Okay, so we'll multiply, and this definitely needs, let's turn the scale up a bit. Let's turn the distortion up like that, and then let's white black clamp it to get rid of some of that black. There. You know what, we can scale it up more. There we go. So yeah, it gives you the ability to use more than 5 layers, to stack as many of these together as you'd like for whatever kind of possible result you're after. And more importantly, I don't know how many of you, like the astute amongst you, may have noticed that like when I opened this up and showed you the big stack of like brick textures, they're all going to the same output. They're all being fed through the same output. That means that right here on our first one, where we have the brick texture selected for layer 1, and down here for layer 5 also have the brick texture selected, that means that any change we make in the brick texture is going to change both of them, because they're the same texture. So these settings are adjusting both of them at the same time. Well, say you wanted 2 different brick textures. Well, just drop another one in line and you use it accordingly, because its settings are now independent of the node group before it. So yeah, it's like I said, it's kind of just an all-in-one node mask generator thing, I guess. Anyway, the main focus, and where a majority of all of this, like everything across the top, the entire upper portion of this node setup, is these settings right here. And that's kind of the main focus behind it. It's there to make it fast and super easy for anybody, regardless of how good they are with procedural textures, to just sit down and have a network that layers multiple different controllable textures together with a variety of different methods, and they never have to worry about building a network themselves to be able to do that. Just drop it in and plug it in. And you know what, while here, let's go ahead and switch to EV. And as you can see, we're not seeing anything. Technically, that's going to make me feel bad because I said it works in EV, and that's because when I tested last time, it did. Maybe it's just needing an update. Let's turn this carry mix method to 0. Well, that definitely updated it. Not how I wanted it to update, but that updated it. Let's see. Let's go ahead and just get rid of you because I was using you for cycles. I don't use EV very often, so I'm not 100% familiar with all of its quirks and stuff. I do know that, yeah, I was gonna say I plugged this in EV and it was working. Maybe it's because that last one was already being used in cycles. Yeah, see, it works fine in EV. Checker texture, combine method, set you back to the default variation of 7. We had 3 was a magic that was multiplied, 4 was a noise that was multiplied, and 5 was that same brick and hit with linear light. So there we go. Same material, same appearance, works just fine. It's just, yeah, I tend to find that sometimes updating the image takes a while, and we might have just been waiting last time for the image to update. I don't know. But I grew impatient, deleted the node groups, put a new one in, and it's working fine now. So whatever. Like I said, I don't use Eevee very often. I'm not very familiar with all of its bugs and stuff, but yes, this node group, just like the pattern generator node group, does work in Eevee. And yeah, speaking of the pattern generator node group, this was kind of meant to work with it if you wanted. So you can plug it into the vector options of the different textures and mirror them and stretch them around different objects with different vector coordinates and so on and so forth. So yeah, there you go. This video is way longer than it was supposed to be. I've been rambling a bunch. I'm sorry. Those of you who watch me know that I do that, so you're probably not surprised. Actually, I'm probably not talking to you anymore because you shut crap off when I started rambling. Anyway, that's the rundown on how to use the uglyMasks node group. And just like with the ugly skies and the ugly patterns, you're welcome to join the Facebook group. It's Ugly Nodes for Blender, if I remember right. And it's just a forum or community where people can discuss different setting combinations that they found that they liked, or ask questions about the node groups, try to learn more about them, so on and so forth. Just a community place for everybody to hang out and talk about these node groups. Hopefully, you'll find it useful. Like I said, there is a free version. Let's not save real quick. Open Blender back up. And let's go ahead and open up the light version. The light version does not have the carry through option, so they're not stackable. Instead of 5 layers, it's 3 layers, and it does not have the variation option where it cycles through all the different variations of the types of texture. I mean, well, I guess 7 and 6 still have variation. The brick texture doesn't have variation anymore. Its variation selection's gone and stuff like that. Other than that, though, it's pretty much the same node group. It's just, yeah, it's not stackable like the Pro version, and it only has 3 layers instead of 5 layers, and missing just a couple other selection features. That's the only real difference. So yeah, if you have the free version, don't worry, it's still the same thing. It's just missing a couple things that the pro version has, and yeah, the video still covers everything that it's got. All right, well, I hope you all find some use to it, even if it's just the free one. Honestly, it makes me happy when people find use to the crap that I make. So yeah, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to throw them into the comments down below, and I'll try to get back to you when I can. If you're waiting for a tutorial video of the Swirling Fire in Space remake, sorry, I'm freaking trying. Mana flow is weird when it comes to force fields interacting with fire. Like, you have to have smoke in the fire for it to do anything at all. It's just weird. I still haven't found an accurate recreation, and I am working on it. As soon as I have an accurate recreation for my first tutorial, that's Swirling Fire in Space, I will have a video out that is redoing it in newer versions of Blender with the mana flow settings. But like I said, it's freaking weird. It doesn't want to play right. I've got 20 or 30 hours into trying to figure it out. I have a few options that kind of look okay, but they're not a recreation of the original tutorial. They are clearly different in appearance in many ways. They might look cool, they might look okay, but they're not what it's supposed to be, so I'm still working at it. I'm hoping that at some point I can manage to find a way to recreate that first tutorial accurately in ManaFlow, and then I'll get that tutorial up. If not, if I fail, well, then I'll get a tutorial up showing you the methods I came up with that are similar as far as the best that I can do. All right. Well, I think that covers everything. Hopefully, y'all find some use in this node group. If nothing else, then to deconstruct it and learn from it so you have an easier time when making procedural textures. A lot of what got used in here is covered as far as like these selection methods. You can learn about in the tutorial video I did as far as using logic gates or creating logic gates with material nodes, because this is basically just a bunch of AND gates and stuff to control these selection methods. Alright, well, that'll do it for this video. Hopefully y'all found it useful in some way or another. And yeah, as soon as this video's up, these should be available on the Gumroad account. That's just uglyShader at Gumroad or whatnot. So yeah, that does it. Good luck, coming up with ideas or ways to use them. Hopefully you have some fun with them, and as always, enjoy creating things your way. So till next time.